Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with Greg. Greg, how are you doing today? It's Memorial
Well,
Day.
it is Memorial Day. I'm having like I got camo pants on.
Yeah? How is that different than every other day, Greg?
It's Memorial Day, and you know what's funny? I was taking my kids school shopping, or not school shopping, just like transitioning from into warmer weather shopping, right?
Yep.
And I was like, let's go into American Eagle for like, 1998's time's sake, right? Just to check it out. I found my way into a pair of cargo camouflage pants like it was 1999, and
Wow.
I'm happy to
Cargos.
be cargos and everything, you know? Is this coming back? I'm not sure, but it's coming back into my life. So
I think cargos did come back. I just am not hopping on that train. I
you
left them a while ago.
dress a little bit nicer than I do. You have more of a formal decorum and reverence for the office, where I will wear a t-shirt and some cargo pants. Try to have a nice shoe with it, though, I think
A
is,
nice shoe with it.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be a little bit more relaxed in my as I get older, comfy. But anyways, I'm taking up too much here. I'm just excited for this, Dave, because I think I might take notes on what your five, even though we probably utilize, you know, 20 interventions, like your top five.
Well, I at first, I mean, a lot of this has been a little bit of I don't know. I felt kind of like wow, do I even have five interventions I use? So
Yeah.
that was a little bit off-putting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I'll get into that, but before I do anything, I wanted to just kind of recognize the new Patreon members. So we got Chris Perrin, and it's not me who have joined bonus level tiers, which is great.
Thank you so much. And it means everything. And just while we're on the subject of Patreon, I kind of want to add something here, Dave. So we're working hard to make sure we get episodes and make sure we get bonus episodes. Sometimes, life gets in the way, like we have our regular jobs and demands. But what I think like, and you all who listen probably are best to tell us what you think about this. I was thinking it might be helpful, or this is something I would have appreciated in my sort of difficult times, where I would offer, you guys could write in like your situation, your whatever's going on in your life, and be as vulnerable as you want. And then Dave and I will kind of riff about it and see whether or not we think we could, what we have to offer. It's not like we're going to give like perfect advice or anything and take it with a grain of salt, but like it might be fun to have a couple of therapists rap about your issue, and maybe that could provide some, I don't know, help in a way, hopefully. So if that would be a kind of cool thing for bonus episodes, I think, Dave. So if anybody's interested in that, please let us know, and you know where to let us know on the Patreon.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so I guess we can get into this. I don't think there's going to be a ton of surprises here. I think a lot of this is what people probably, if you've been a listener to this show for any period of time, you've probably heard me talk about a lot of these things, probably ad nauseum at this point. So a lot of this is going to feel redundant, but I think, yeah, I'm trying to figure out the best place to start. So I would kind of describe a lot of the therapeutic styles that I use as more of taking strategies and just kind of doing like a plug and fill into like what fits for each individual. So it's very individualized. I wouldn't say I use anything like across the board. But there are some strategies I probably lean to a little bit more than others. The first one I'll talk about just because you alluded to it last time, Greg. So it's like, all right, let's just start off there. Um, so with DBT emotion regulation, we have one of the strategies there being opposite action. It's super basic. It's like the most simple thing and it makes so much sense, but it's like one of those duh moments when someone tells it to you that I feel like it's easy and I can use it with adults, I can use it with kids. But essentially what that strategy tries to have you do is look at like the exact opposite of whatever the emotion is kind of encouraging you to do. And a way to look at it as like why it would make sense is think about yourself if you're like combating
Yeah.
something or what is the the issue telling you to do. So it would make sense that you don't want to do that and you want to it's like a bully, right? That's how I usually phrase it to kids. It's like, think about a bully. What are they trying to get you to do? They're trying to get you to react. All right, so what's the opposite of that? Oh, not reacting, walking away, ignoring, acting like it doesn't bother you, things like that.
Or
And
even like
that's
over the top, Dave. Like it's like I think like sometimes it's important to look at what has these emotions that, in a lot of ways are unwanted, but more important than the emotion, it's like what is the behavior and what is the consequence of the behavior. So it's like you talk about a bully, like maybe if like this bully's been, and you're angry, right? Maybe the opposite of anger is, I don't know, maybe in some ways it's compassion and to approach that person with compassion or like, and it sounds so silly, but like when you see the change in behavior, when you see the change in consequence, and it's like sort of a position of strength because you're not being driven by your emotions alone, you're kind of being driven more by an outcome that you're looking for. I think it's, you know,
yeah,
great. It is
yeah.
kind of on the nose.
So I mean, like an obvious one for this is, like depression.
Uh-huh.
What does depression make you want to do? So we come up with a list of all the things that are linked to your depression. Like it makes me want to stay in bed. It makes me want to not call friends. And then we take that list and we say, well, what is the opposite of all those things? And the idea is depression can exist if you're doing all the things that are opposite of it. Another way to envision this, I always tell people, is imagine it's something outside of you. It's like a physical entity, and we maybe even give it a name. And when it comes around, what is it trying to get you to do? So you got to combat it by doing the opposite of that. So little things like that. Sometimes I'll borrow your idea, Greg, with like the essence.
Yeah.
Just essentially, if you don't do these things, it can't exist. So very simple.
No, and I think that you're right, Dave. And I, for some reason, this like slipped my mind, which is funny because, but I think best put to use in it with depression, right? Because it's very obvious that what depression is making you live outside
Mhm.
of like how you want to live, and I guess anxiety can you can kind of like put it in the same way.
Yeah, anxiety is a little different though, because like it's kind of anxiety is just a worry. So it's about putting action to the worry. You know what I mean? And depression is more about doing the opposite of what depression makes you want to do. Like anxiety can be good because it like gets us thinking about things, but then we feel frozen because we're overwhelmed with all the worry, right?
Yeah.
So you got to like almost like force yourself to put action to it. But depression's kind of different in the way that it's like you have to do the opposite of what it wants you to do.
Yeah. Because without those things that like without like all you make that list of like I don't know, maybe they talk about isolating, maybe they talk about they're not hanging out with their friends as much as they used to. Maybe they're talking about sleeping late, not eating right, not getting enough
Mhm.
sleep. There's like you can make a pretty decent list of what depression has done to your life and how it's changed you. And doing the opposite of those things, I think is like you said, obvious but important.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need someone to say, "Hey, let's do this."
To your point though, I guess if anxiety is causing you to want to avoid things, then yeah, you want to that would be a time where maybe we look at the opposite action.
Yeah, and we're talking about exposure again in a way.
Yeah.
Different way to sort of frame it.
Yep.
I like the way, in the past you've talked about depression as an entity, and I actually like that. So I'm glad you like the essence thing, but the entity thing is really almost like a parasite or this thing that's trying to take from you. And how do you combat this thing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep. All right. So another emotion regulation strategy that I utilize, and another kind of simple in theory, harder to actually do though, riding the wave. And that is kind of similar to your cognitive diffusion that you discussed last episode, but it's like when the strong emotions hit, just remember that it's temporary and it will pass. So instead of fighting them, trying to resist them, or giving into them, you got to let yourself feel and watch them fade like waves. Um, this is something that we often use with like self harm, but it could also be kind of any behavior, like any emotion that maybe that makes you want to engage in something that's not positive for yourself.
I really do like the concept of riding the wave because it's like people are think in terms of happiness and sadness, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm either happy or I'm sad. But I think riding the wave is something where it's like it changes your perspective in that you realize it's very easy to realize that happiness is like temporal and like man, this can't last forever. I should enjoy it. But it's just as logical to just say the same thing about sadness. Like I don't want to be sad, I don't want to be happy. It's like, well, both of those things are temporal and pretty, we hold on to sadness a little bit longer because we're trying to get rid of it. And with happiness, it's weird because we're trying to keep it. So it's like a little more slippery. But I think riding the wave is just suggests that like, hey, these emotions come and go. I don't know. Like there is something kind of beautiful about it where like you don't have to get super attached to them. Just kind of, it can be there and then you can sit in it and it doesn't have to be something. Is it really, Dave, all about just figuring out what you want to be doing and not letting anything get in the way? Is that what these all these interventions essentially have in common?
Part of it, and then part of it is also just understanding that you have the strength and ability to actually get through tough things. So riding the wave is literally just showing yourself like, I can handle this. This emotion doesn't have to be the thing that creates negative action for me.
Yeah.
Like I can handle my own thoughts.
And I
So
imagine
that's
like,
hard for people.
yeah, no, and like the more you experience that, you sort of learn from that, right? Where it's like instead of letting the thoughts create an action or to retreat from them or to kind of do some kind of coping strategy, whether it's like a substance or whatever, you kind of teach yourself over and over again that like, oh, I can feel this and it does pass if I allow it, you know,
Yeah.
instead of trying to push back or avoid it in some way.
Speaking of riding the wave, I just figured out how to be able to hear myself in my headphones, and that is creating all the difference right now.
Really?
So I've spent this entire episode thinking I was not going to be able to hear my own voice, and it's been driving me nuts. But I was just going to ride that wave.
You were riding it perfectly.
Well, I don't know about perfect. It probably can be told in my demeanor because it was really frustrating. But I can hear myself now, so this is much better. All right, cool. So another thing with riding the wave though is like there are some challenges that are really, really hard to literally just sit out. So that might involve maybe grabbing some items to hold on to, uh, trying to engage in something while riding the wave. And I'm talking more about like those self-harm
Yeah,
urges. So
right.
like having idle hands trying to ride the wave might be really challenging. So maybe grabbing some fidgets and things like that. So, there's some other components that can go into it, but the concept I think is the most important part, which is that it's a temporary emotion. It will pass. It will get worse before it gets better though. This
Absolutely.
I have to explain to literally every person
Mhm.
because nobody wants that.
Yeah, and it's
But it's
almost like
it's true.
well, it kind of you kind of have to shift your mindset from like trying to avoid we're calling it the wave, right? This flood of emotion to sort of welcoming it. And if you're welcoming it, it makes it a little and seeking it almost as like something to wash over you so that you can prove to yourself over and over again that it's possible to live with this and still sort of, do what you got to do, thrive, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, riding the wave is a great one. I know, Dave, it's funny when you started this thing off with like, do I use interventions? It's like, yeah, kind of use like bits and pieces of all of them in a weird way. It's all
Yeah.
like Frankenstein together, you know?
Exactly. There's no like curriculum happening because it's impossible. I truly feel like it's impossible because everybody's so different and
It,
nobody learns the same way. So why would I expect that any therapeutic modality would be fitting for every single person? So yeah,
Yeah, no, if you're doing one-on-one work, you got to kind of that's exactly what it is.
got to be
It's
flexible.
tailored.
The next one you also alluded to last episode, but exposure therapy. I do enjoy that. I think I like it just because it's challenging and it's uncomfortable, but it's also I do like that it is a little structured and kind of gives a little direction on its own, which is nice. So exposure therapy, obviously, people come in, they might have an adverse reaction to certain things, certain situations, whatever that may be. And the idea is to expose yourself to it at various levels so you increase your comfortability and your it's actually more about increasing your confidence in the fact that you can handle it. It's not about even comfort because sometimes you'll some things you'll never get comfortable with, but it's about understanding I can get through this and I have the skills to bring myself down if I start to get escalated.
Yeah. Dave, I have a question for you. Like
Yeah.
it's like there's times that come up where it's like so I'm glad that you kind of like phrase it that way where there's certain phobias, I guess I'll say, like sort of irrational fears that's like probably pretty important to get over because, it gets in the way of work or it gets in the way of like, it gets in the way of your development in some way. But aren't there some sort of phobias or fears that people just carry with them for life and it's just like, okay.
I,
Do you feel?
I'm I mean if it's like spiders or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
sure, like you can get over phobias to spiders, but ultimately do you really need to?
Right, right. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about
Pickles, like pickles, like you can keep your phobia to pickles. That's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah, you can almost like laugh about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have this sort of phobia about bridges. It's developed later on in my life, and I don't know. And I guess I'm kind of like doing some self-reflection here and like maybe what would, your thoughts on this. Like it has limited me in some ways, or if like someone's like, "Oh, we're going to Newport for brunch," and I'm like, "Pfft, you're going to fucking Newport. I'm
Yeah,
staying
yeah.
here." You know what I mean? But like, I don't know. Is it something I need to get over? I guess if I I guess if I get a job, I would have to cross a bridge for. I don't know.
Right.
I
Or if
mean,
it's really impacting your life in a significant way where like you're missing out on certain things because of that phobia, then yeah.
yeah.
If a once a or twice a year brunch is the thing that you're missing, probably not the worst thing in the world. But
I
if
mean, a
it's
big brunch.
like if it's a frequent thing and it's a gathering of people that you don't get to see otherwise, then maybe it is worth
Yeah.
facing, you
Boring.
know?
The funny thing about exposure to a bridge is like, I can't like go halfway across the Newport Bridge and be like, all right, fuck it, I can't do it anymore. I exposed a little. It's like that's like flooding, right? That would be a sort of a different sort of type of
Yeah.
exposure.
You could find smaller bridges to start with though.
Yeah, I can do smaller bridges pretty good, and I think I have. You know what? It's something I'm gonna be working. I'll keep you all posted on my bridge work.
So if you were working with someone, you could take a ride over a bridge with that person
Yeah.
eventually. So for exposure therapy, it starts with making an exposure hierarchy. So basically, you're thinking of every exposure you could have to whatever this thing is, and you're going to be putting it in a ranking of like what causes you the least amount of like emotion versus like to the top where it'd be like the most amount of like emotional reaction, right? Um, then you are going to gradually and slowly engage or expose yourself to these things, starting with the least impactful and working your way up to the most impactful. The other thing that's going to be happening kind of like at the same time is you'll be working with your therapist to learn relaxation techniques to be used while you're engaging so you can bring yourself down during the exposure. Some examples would be like deep breathing. And the thing I like to always remind people is the deep breathing stimulates the vagus nerve, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which triggers your rest and digest rest, which is like your body calms down.
Yeah.
Um,
Opposite of fight or flight.
right. And that's always done through extending your exhale because it sends those messages to your body. So super important actually, because you can literally bring like your pulse rate, your heart rate down by deep breathing, and you can see it happening if you had like a monitor on. And I think that's so powerful for people to be able to see, like, wow, I have control over my body,
It,
and that's
you're
something we
hitting
work
a
with.
nail on the head with that one. Like we've definitely talked about using that early on. But like to be able to see your heart rate literally slow as you like you said, it's more like there's a million different there's box breathing, there's like the 5, 7, 9 or whatever the hell. There's like a million different sort of breathing exercises, but ultimately it's like breathing out a little bit longer than you're breathing in. It, and even more sort of like simplified, it's like slowing down instead of speeding up your breathing.
Yeah, because when you're getting anxious, when you're getting overwhelmed, you're speeding, your breathing becomes rapid. Even
Yeah.
if you don't even realize it, it's becoming quicker. Your heart rate's starting to go up. So you want to do all the things that will bring that back down. So, exposure therapy, I find it to be very effective. It's literally the opposite of avoidance. So, I'm all about it because I always talk about how much avoidance is, such a danger to all of us, including myself and all the things that I avoid in life. So, yeah. Um, Next, cognitive restructuring or
Okay.
reframing. Um, this is huge. This is huge. I never use that phrase cognitive restructuring when I say it. I usually just say like we got to work on reframing thoughts here.
Yeah.
But it's essentially the idea is identifying your and challenging irrational or maladaptive thoughts, or AKA cognitive distortions, which we did a whole episode on.
Yep.
Um, and that's done through first noticing your thoughts. So sometimes that will come up in therapy sessions. Like someone will make a statement. It's like, oh, that was an interesting one. Where did that come from? And then we'll explore that. And then you kind of notice like a pattern in the thought processes or like core beliefs or things like that about the person. And you want to do it in a way that feels authentic. So you're not going to do it in a way that's like, no, that's not true. That thought's not true. Because
Yeah.
the thought started somewhere. And typically it starts from an actual event that either made us make that connection or it was told to us, or we actually had a literal failure. But then after that failure, we then went out and looked for a bunch of other examples of things that are going to kind of fit in line with that failure. So now it becomes our new thought process, right? And we dismiss all the positive things that took place and all that stuff. That's, um, one of the cognitive distortions, obviously. So you want to start with getting evidence for and against the thought, and then using that evidence to try to replace the thought with something that's a little bit more balanced, a little bit more realistic, and a little less negatively impactful.
Yeah. And it's CBT 101, really.
Right.
It's like it really is about, and it's funny because it seems, so a lot of these things seem silly, but the way you talk to yourself matters. Even if you're like you're saying it and you don't think it's impacting you, like your subconscious is kind of like digesting that. When you say things like, "Oh, I'll never get a job again," or "this person hates me," or "No, I'll never find a relationship," or "I'm not good enough," or "I'm never going to feel better." Like all these things are all or nothing sort of hyperbolic ways of thinking, which are almost impossible to be true, right? So just even if you challenge it a little bit and say like, oh, like no one ever likes me, or I never can stay in a relationship. It's like, all right, well, you've had some difficulties in relationships, but is it possible that like if we make some adjustments, or is it possible that you just haven't met the right person yet? Or like there's certain ways to like challenge these things and let a little. So I guess the what we're saying here is like a borrow from Edith Eger is like you cannot banish the darkness sometimes of your thoughts. You cannot. But what you have a responsibility to do is create a little bit of light where you can kind of see the possibilities instead of just all what could go wrong. I think
Right.
that's im-
Yeah. A big part of this is acknowledging that there is a little bit of ounce of truth, maybe
Mhm.
to some of the thoughts.
Sure.
Because if you don't acknowledge that, it's not authentic. The
Yeah.
work, it feels fake, and you will know that you're lying to yourself,
Yeah.
or you'll tell yourself you're lying to yourself if you don't acknowledge the truth in the thought. Or I
Yeah,
don't even know if truth is the right word, but like the validity of some of the thoughts.
right, right.
And it
And
doesn't have to be a
where they came
negative.
from, and like why, just because things have gone a certain way, there's no evidence that it's going to go that way forever. And can you look through through the lens of others and say like, well, has anybody been in a really tough spot? It's funny because I think there's something about like the grit and understanding that you're going to be down, you're going to have tough times, but like knowing that it can be better, like finding, you know, light at the end of the tunnel. Like I was just watching this George Washington documentary. Guy's dad
Of
died when
course
he,
you were.
his dad died at 11. I didn't know that. That's crazy. And then he literally, and so then he's a young officer and he's trying to prove himself to Britain because he's a young British officer, but they're not letting them, get to a certain rank because there's almost like the Americans are second class citizens to the crown. But they say, so he's like on this thing and he's trying to prove himself and he like shoots this like French diplomat and like pretty much starts the French Indian Wars like all on his own, like screws up so royally, and like in only a way that you could screw up in like the 1700s, where you're like, oh, I shot like I like started a war by just shooting some guy by accident.
Yeah.
And then like so being completely down and just kind of he always called it, which I think is like super interesting being from Rhode Island. He always called it Providence, and he always thought like, no, there's more. Like this isn't it. Like it's almost like he realized that he was part of a story and the story wasn't over yet, you
Mm,
know? And I
yeah.
thought that was super powerful because it made him never kind of get down, and it just propelled him. He just like had this grit that just he wouldn't give up. If there's so many times in his life where it's just like, all right, man, this is it. Like you really screwed up this time. You need to just go farm and just leave it alone. But he wouldn't. And because he wouldn't, it did sort of lead to glory. It was
Hmm.
kind of a wild story.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knew?
Who knew, really?
Wait, I didn't know George Washington was like a murderer.
He wasn't.
He shot a man, dude.
He did. He shot a many men, but he yeah, he did. He shot like a French diplomat. He was kind of tricked by the Native Americans. Um, Not that they were doing anything wrong. They were had their own sort of, thing going on. It just complicated back then. But anyway, there's lots of stories like that.
It's complicated. Uh, so one of my favorite things about cognitive restructuring is explaining it to patients.
Yeah.
I always have fun with that because I'll use like an example in the office to explain how we can both be looking at the same thing and have totally different thoughts, and how like your thought might make you feel positive while my thought might make me feel negative about that thing. And
Yeah.
I just like having fun with it. Like we'll look at a chair and I'll explain like I'm looking at that chair and I'm like, "Oh, my chair is so beautiful. I love it in my office." And then you're looking at the chair and you're like, "Wow, Dave has an ugly ass chair. That is hideous. Only he would have that. This makes me even question him as a person." Like, and they always smirk when we have like, when I kind of bring it to light, but that's kind of it, right? There's the chair doesn't give you feeling. It's our thoughts about the chair that give us feeling.
There, the event, the argument,
Yeah.
that none of it gives you straight to emotion. It's the thoughts that you have that around it, and whether those thoughts are adaptive or maladaptive is how we can kind of address that. And I think that's yeah, like this time of year with graduation, some people are thinking, "Oh, sweet, like I never have to freaking step foot in school again," and some people are like, "Oh, I'm gonna miss all my friends."
Yeah.
Same event,
Same
same
thing.
exact event,
Yep. Different
but
ways of looking at it.
different ways of looking at it, right?
Yep.
I mean, and they both could find balance a little
And
bit.
they're both true. And they're
Yeah.
both true. And the way to handle that is by looking at a different way of viewing it that makes you feel maybe a little less intensely if you're really struggling with the thoughts.
Right. And the goal is not to feel fantastic all of a sudden by switching your emotions. It's just to let a little bit in.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Another huge one for me is, so I thought it was an actual strategy, but I might have made it up.
Okay.
But like I borrowed it from a various things. It is a strategy. I just don't know what it's called.
Let's
Like
hear it.
what's the label?
Yeah.
So it's like a conflict resolution strategy,
Okay.
but it also fits into the line of like assertive communication. However, it's definitely not like fully in the assertive communication, because it's about how to approach giving someone like negative feedback or addressing some kind of conflict that you have with this person.
Okay.
So the way that I frame it to people is, when we are approached in too aggressively or too directly or abruptly about something negative, we will immediately put up walls. So anything you say following that immediate interaction is going to be not heard with open ears. It's going to be heard through defense. So in order to actually give someone some negative feedback or some kind of like important feedback that you need to address, you want them to listen. Obviously, you don't want to waste your breath. So you need them to keep their walls down. So you do that by approaching the person and expressing first off why this even matters. Like, what about your relationship is even making you want to say something about it in the first place? The next thing you would do when you're giving the feedback or whatever it is, use I statements, focus on the issue and how it made you feel, and be aware and avoid and try not to shift blame, because as soon as you shift blame, that's when, again, the walls are going to come right up. And then closing it, reiterate the reason this is important, and why you hope for some kind of resolution based on the value of that relationship. So a perfect example would be like, say this is a work relationship, right?
Yeah.
I could be like, Greg, you and I have known each other for a long time. I always value the fact that like when something's going on, I feel like I can always approach you, and you typically hear me out, which I really, really appreciate, which is why it's important for me to say this to you. When this happens, this has been making me feel this way. And, I feel like we need to make a change here. Again, I just value this friendship and working relationship, and I hope that like we can come to a resolution and work together on this. Now, when you say something like that, it comes off as what? Less
Yeah,
blaming.
blaming, less confrontational, and it's almost like the first thing. If we're gonna name this thing, I think the first word should be like disarm.
I thought it was the disarming approach, but then I actually
It's
looked
I
up
don't
the
I don't
disarming approach, and that's totally different.
it's almost like, well, I mean, this is just proper communication too, right? It's like almost kind of like a compliment sandwich, but just like not. It's disarming. Well, I look, because I've had I've seen a therapist about 4 times now in
Mm.
like a year and a half. I try to get better with that, but I remember like I was having relationship difficulty, and he kind of said something along the same lines where it was like it just kind of like encouraged me to be like, you mean enough to me to kind of talk about this,
Right.
that kind of thing, where it's like getting that point across first, it can be a little bit disarming. And also to talk about like instead of being like, you've been doing this and you've been doing that, be like, I noticed that this has kind of been showing up between us, like almost like a noticing, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Which kind of like still goes with that in that same line of, I'm not like, hey, you fucking like you gotta switch this shit up
Because
because
as soon as you say
yeah,
you did this, then
yeah.
it's going to turn around and they're going to
Defensive. And then you're
say,
like, well, what have
well,
you been
well, you've been doing that. You've been doing this. So
doing?
it's like, already know where the conversation's going to go. Yeah, it's conflict resolution, utilizing disarming, utilizing goal-oriented communication,
Ooh, I like
right?
that goal-oriented communication.
Because I am not going to put this much effort in unless I actually do want a resolution. Like if I want an argument, I'm not going to do this approach.
Okay, so that's the perfect point right there. That's like that should be like the in bold. Fuck, whatever you just said. That was
Resolution.
no, no, you put it perfectly where like, oh yeah, you want this, you're aiming for a desired outcome. If this is someone who you could give a shit less about or a job that you want to leave, maybe you get to say you go fuck yourself. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I hate to say that
Yeah.
on the thing, but like it's like, you know, but if this is it's sort of there's sort of an honesty to it, right? Where it's like, no, this is valuable to me. And if I put my emotions aside for a second and my hurt aside for a second, like how do I want this? What gets me closer to where I want to be? Like me blaming you for everything, even though in my head I could think it's your fault.
Right.
It's not
100%.
important. That's not really important because that's not going to get me to the outcome the desired outcome.
Ego is the thing that gets in the way.
Yeah.
Pride and ego, when you put those things to the side, because they are blockers a lot of times to our goals, we are able to effectively resolve so many communication issues, conflicts. We can be way more successful when our pride and ego are put to the side.
That's right.
We
Check
have to, check your ego. We have to consider other people's pride and ego and that like at times, and the fact that like if their pride and ego get in the way, they're not going to hear me. If my pride and ego gets in the way, I'm not going to hear them. So yeah, it's about looking at people in a different way, I guess.
Yeah, no, come on. I mean, how great would that be if we could all do that? I know it's hard and I know it's like flighty, but man, in the times in my life where I have been able to kind of, when I know a relationship's important and I know I want to make it work and I know I want to give it everything I got, um, I know that I have to check my ego because how I feel isn't as important as what I want.
Right, exactly.
So,
And I had a great success story with this just the other day. had a individual, new individual I'm working with. She had a conflict with a coworker who kind of overstepped boundaries. She was talking to me about it. She's like, I know I got to address this. I don't, we were kind of brainstorming how to do it. And I did this approach with her. We mapped it out. She kind of practiced it a little bit. She did it like the next day. The woman, her coworker, texted her later that night and thanked her for the way that she communicated and said, like, I'm so glad that you felt like you could come to me and talk to me about this. And I was like, wow, that was crazy how effective that was. Like,
Yeah, because and again, you got to remember, like you're kind of so we're saying forget ego. We're saying forget our ego and remember theirs because you're using theirs as a tool in a sense where it's
yeah,
like you might feel like by kowtowing or I don't know what the right word for it is like you're almost like acquiescing, but like you're not because you're keeping control and power in the situation by telling them something that's probably true. Like I respect you enough, and I want, and now they don't want to let that down. This like version of them that you've sort of highlighted. They don't want to like betray that. They want to say, yeah, I am kind of the kind of guy who you can talk to, and I
yeah,
won't.
yeah.
Like like you don't want to be like all of a sudden, oh no, I'm not that guy. I'm actually, it's just kind of good communication.
Even beyond like the egos, it was validating to my patient how like her opinion about this was also important to the other person,
Yeah.
and they heard it. So it was like just all around a win-win. I really do love this style of communication, and like you said, it would be so wonderful if like we all use this all the time, but obviously
Yeah.
it's hard. um all right, the next one is one that I've been accused of using
Hmm.
quite a bit. I don't think I like intend to. It's just maybe the way that I ask questions, and that's Socratic questioning, which is kind of like open-ended prompts.
Who's
Um,
accusing you of that? Who is accusing you of like is this Socratic question?
I've literally had people say like, Socratic questioning, but then also like, it does come up. Like maybe not using the term, but like I they're kind of insinuating that this is what's happening. So it's open-ended prompts designed to stimulate critical thinking, undercover underlying beliefs, and examine complex ideas. So instead of providing the answers, you kind of guide them to discover the truths. Like
Yeah.
give the answers themselves that they already have, and it kind of goes in line with this thing that we all believe in therapy is everybody has the answers already inside them.
Mm.
It's kind of our job is to kind of guide them to those answers. And then like a lot of my patients understand that at this point, and it's nice that they understand that. They will sometimes say that like, I know I have the answers, and like, it's like, yeah, exactly, we just got to get you there.
We just gotta get there. And it's like I can remember a very specific case for me with like Socratic question and came this woman like was really kind of down on herself about the kind of mom she was. And we were just kind of like, all right, well, let's separate this whole thing. Let's just kind of talk about what a bad mom is. And like, why don't you give me some like sort of examples of what a bad mom does? Let's like describe some bad moms. Maybe we can think of some, maybe there's some in pop culture. We would describe these people. She'd be like, they beat their kids and like burn them with
Right.
like cigarette. And it's like, oh, okay. So do you do any of those things? Um, no, and it was like I ask her questions like, well, does a bad mom want to be a good mom? Does a bad mom care if she's a bad mom? Isn't that sort of and just like these questions where you're not saying, no, you're not a bad mom, but you're like kind of forcing them to kind of disagree with themselves with their own logic is I think like what Socratic questioning can be useful. But sometimes I
Yeah.
find it hard, It can be a little hard.
The big struggle I often find is people feel like sometimes though it's not enough.
Yeah,
So like, sure, I do the bare minimum or maybe slightly more, but that's expected of that role,
right.
and that's not really enough. So their own expectations for themselves sometimes get in the way. It's hard for them to take pride in just the fact that they're doing better than not being a bad mom.
Yeah, you know what?
That gets in the way sometimes.
Managing expectations is could be
Yeah.
an intervention in and of itself, like
Some
discussing like, well, what does this
right.
look like when you're better? What does this look like when you feel better about this? Like it doesn't mean like I'm gonna because sometimes we're like we run into people who like want to feel great. They want to like go to therapy for a few months and just feel incredible. And it's like, sometimes that's possible. Sometimes there's things that, but other times it takes a little bit more work than that. And other times you have to adjust what your metrics of success are. It's like, well, I'm eating now, or I'm not staying in bed all day. I've been getting to work. Like things like that are wins you have to kind of measure. You can't just be like, well, I'm not where I want to be. It's like, well, are you ever going to be where you want to be?
Yeah. It's part of it is also having self-compassion and saying like, "Oh, I'm having a hard time right now. My expectations for myself have to be a little tempered at
Yeah.
this moment. It doesn't have to always be this way. I can still hold, high regard for myself, high expectations, but also understand when I'm having a tough time and maybe what I'm doing now is like the best I can at this moment."
Dave, I think that's a good little list you put together there.
Yeah, the only other thing, and I wasn't sure if this was even like a strategy, so I just threw it on here as like a mention, like finding your why.
I mean, I think that's literally first session, wildly important um work, right? It's like the existential piece that we kind of held on to throughout
Yeah.
this. I think
Like
that's the Frankel thing.
yeah, why haven't all those negative thoughts you've had, why haven't you acted on some of them? What
Yeah.
keeps you going? Why are you doing the work you're doing? Stuff like that. But I mean that's that like
Meaning,
I said,
right?
that yeah,
Meaning.
meaning, finding your why, finding your meaning, that comes up quite a bit.
Yeah, which is, that can be tough for people. But I think it can and it can't. Sometimes it's like easily revealed, right? Sometimes you're like, well, how come you haven't acted on your Oh, well, I have kids. All right, well, that's going to be a huge part of your why, right? And
Yeah,
then we ultimately want to make the goal, the why part, not just other people in their life, but their own future and their own sort of um, contribution. So.
sure.
All right, Dave. Well, you know what? Honestly, I think these past two episodes are kind of pretty useful to the student therapists out there if they're just starting. I mean, I'm not even kidding. Like if you like a good little, if you can write each one of these down and kind of because you don't want to overwhelm yourself with 50 interventions or 100 interventions. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's so many. It's like
Oh, well,
six
and you're
up.
exactly right. And it's also, so here's the thing, like over time, we picked these as the things we gravitate to, not just because we think they're the most effective strategies, because there's so many strategies out there that could also be effective.
Yeah.
We gravitate to these because they fit our specific style. And I think that's so important to recognize. Instead of feeling like I got to learn all of them, I got to immerse myself in all these strategies and try to use as many as possible. Find what works for you, what you can deliver the most effectively, what feels right for you, and
Yeah.
what you've had the most success with, because that probably says something there, and what people are responding to the best, the way that you're delivering it.
Yeah, like what you believe in, what you believe would work for
Absolutely.
you, right? I mean, so I think that's,
Part of the biggest struggle with the journey is not trying to become what you think you're supposed to become, but becoming who you are in the field. Again, that person I just mentioned about the effective communication thing, also kind of in our field. And one of the things that like she was identifying was like, oh, I'm just like I struggle with professional language in my documentation. So, and we were kind of talking about things that she feels like she's lacking, and I'm like, yeah, but like, what are your strengths? And similar to probably you and I, what we would say is a lot of it was like that interpersonal stuff. She was like, I'm really good at just kind of like identifying, I think, what people need in a moment. And that, like, I've had a few things that made me reflect and understand that that's maybe one of my skill sets. I was like, well, guess what? All
Yeah.
the professional language in the world could never replace that skill,
No,
because
and
that
and
is a skill other people don't have.
like professional language and documentation is important in a couple settings. Like I've had to so in the setting we work in, professional language and documentation, yeah, right. Like it's just brevity. I've heard someone say to me, um, multiple times now. I've had a psychiatrist and our mentor Liz has said to me, "Your work isn't in documentation. Your work is in what happens in the room."
Right.
The truth.
Yeah.
So, I mean, documentation is for insurance companies and for keeping track, sort of, in a lot of ways, of like what you've been doing. And it's brevity is your friend with private practice, I think. My in the emergency room and at Butler, it's a little bit different. They sort of require a little bit of like professional documentation in that like you're using like their like clinical language and things like that. They're really into that. But that just comes with practice, you know?
Yeah.
It's really just really like Dave, like you said, like that skill that you have, that's your work. That's what you lean into. Documentation. Pff,
So I gave that individual a little homework this week, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing them next because the homework was, all right, well, if that's something you feel like you lack, this, until our next session, I want you to take a little time, invest a little time in yourself to maybe immerse yourself in some of that, like brush up on some clinical language, try
yeah,
to put some effort into improving that. But I also, at the same time, want you to put some effort into utilizing that skill set that you talked about and tell me some examples next time we meet of like times that were really positive that you noticed that skill set benefited you.
yeah.
Because instead of just focusing on what we don't have, also you got to like hone your skills of what you do have and don't forget those skills and prioritize them because that's your bread and butter. But you
It,
can
over
still
and
work
over
on things you want, you know?
Yeah, over and over again, it shows up like this little line shows up for me. And it's not just in your life, although it is in your life, but in every instant of your life, you need to pay attention to the right kinds of things. Like you really do, because you can get, like you just said, you can get all worked up about what you're not good at, but what are you good at?
Right.
You know, like, and then lean into that. Yeah, I think that's we see that problem big. This is a whole other conversation, but I see that problem with my little Ben and like how he's got so many great sort of talents and ideas and strengths, but like sitting in a classroom is not one of them, and math
Yeah.
is not one of
Yeah.
them. And like they really kind of make you feel like a big dipshit because you don't get their math problem. And it's like, what are we doing to this kid? You know?
And then sometimes it's compiled because some parents really prioritize school, which is good, but
Yeah, it's
also
good.
like,
And it's
you have to have also that understanding that life's not all about how you're going to do in a school setting.
no, thank
So,
God.
yeah. Yeah.
And then you do better in school setting when you get older, when you know when you
Exactly.
pick what you can thrive in, right?
Yeah.
When you pick what's good. That's why you and I were like, you must not be a real math guy.
Oh, I suck at math.
Me
I suck
too.
at,
I was
oh,
like,
I'm horrible in science. Science is like not good for me at all.
yeah, like we have a master's in science, so you're a
But like
science master.
actual science,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like science,
Yeah, we didn't see too many beakers or Bunsen burners.
Bunsen burners. Yeah. um, Biology, like I failed biology in undergrad.
I'm getting becoming fascinated in biology though.
Are you?
Yeah, because just because it sort of plays into this work in some ways that are, in animals. I love animals and I love like how they just know what to do. And I think there's something like to learn about that.
Yeah.
Uh, they don't violate their own values. They just do they don't wonder like, they don't do a lot of that. Anyways, that's a conversation for another time. Um,
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. If you get a chance, we would love for ratings and reviews wherever you are listening. It helps us know that we're on track. And also, if you haven't joined our Patreon, please join. Our community is building, it's getting bigger and bigger. Um, and it gives us, that kind of motivation to continue throwing out content. And the content, I think, has gotten a lot different on the bonus side. And I think it's interesting. And I think that you get to see maybe a different side of all this and hear different types of things. Um, so yeah, we would love for that to continue to build, and hopefully you'll join us over there.
yeah, yeah. And thank you so much for the donations because we do put it to good use. I mean, we do really work to kind of put things aside and put this podcast, try our best to get it in there in our busy schedules. One
Yeah,
day we'll be rich and we won't need to. We can just do this. Wouldn't that be nice, Dave?
it would
Just
be.
play your lottery tickets.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but that is not soon. So hang in there with us.
So yeah, everybody, we will be back soon, and we'll see you then. So have a great night, evening, morning, whenever you're listening, and just remember, Big Daddy Greg loves you.
That's right. Big Daddy Greg. Let's hear those in the comments from. Oh, and one more thing Big Daddy Greg wants to mention. No comments so far on the best book in psychology on our bonus episode. Guys, I'm being serious. All right. just leave that at there. You know, let me hear it.
Yeah. Good
I
luck,
know,
Greg.
I
Good
know,
luck.
I know. Thanks.
All right,
All right.
everybody. See you next week.